Well, thank you for joining us this week on Nevada Week. We are back in Washington, D.C. for part 2 of our discussion with the Nevada delegation.
Support for Nevada Week is provided by Senator William H. Hernstat, Cashman Equipment, Southwest Airlines, MGM National Harbor, MGM Resorts International, and additional sponsors.
Let's move on to committees. We've got a very diverse membership of committees here. The first question, I think, Congresswoman Titus, is how do you get in a committee appointment? How does that work?
Well, in the beginning of your term, you will like to put in your preferences, and you want to put in a preference for something that is relevant to your constituency, something that you might have an expertise in, and then something that you're interested in. There's a committee called the Policy and Steering, and I'm our regional representative on that, and they make the decisions. So it was my pleasure and ability to go to our members, find out what they wanted to serve on, and then become the advocate in that committee for them to be on those, get those positions. What was so great is that we were all had different priorities, and so we were able to better serve Nevada because we're spread across so many of the key committees that we're not stepping on each other, we are complementing each other, and I think that's one of the strengths of the delegation.
Absolutely, and how has that worked? I mean, when you're at that kind of appointment level, are you all getting together and saying, "I've got this one, maybe you've got this one, and we've got a gap here, and we fill that there"?
That's right. That's how we talked about it first, and then you go in there, and then you just have to scrap for it because some of these are pretty plum assignments that a lot of people wanted.
You're on a ton of committees and a ton of subcommittees. I mean, how do you balance all of that work? Are you able to get more staffing to kind of help support that? How does that?
It's long hours. We all do that. I chose committees that I think are especially important for Las Vegas. Transportation and infrastructure. I say we don't make anything in Las Vegas except dreams come true. So we have to import everything. So infrastructure and transportation are critical. Homeland security. We are always a target. We have to be very careful about things that go on in Las Vegas. We were the site of the country's largest shooting. You know, you saw some of the terrorists pass through Las Vegas. So Homeland security is very important, and it coordinates with probably the best private security in the world with all of the hotels that are there. And then third, foreign affairs. I find that intellectually interesting. So much is happening around the world, and Las Vegas is an international city. Not only do people from all over the world live there, but people from all over the world come there. And my district is the most ethnically diverse. You have a very large Hispanic population, but the fastest growing is Asian Pacific Island population. So it's very exciting. Lots of food festivals to attend, but also what goes on in foreign affairs is very relevant.
Congressman Amodei, also some of the big topics that are kind of crossover topics, and healthcare is one of those. You've already mentioned that here. On your website, you have House leadership should provide time through committee hearings to discuss all aspects related to our nation's healthcare system. Why is that extra time so important when we're trying to unpackage something as complex as healthcare reform?
Well, you've just hit on it. Healthcare is a very complex subject. There's a lot of moving parts, whether it's clinics, whether it's young people, whether it's older people, whether it's expanded Medicaid. I mean, you name it. Private health insurance, hospitals, how are they doing? Federally qualified clinics. I mean, you go on and on and on. And so it's one of those things that when everything else fails, it's like, maybe we ought to try finding out what the actual facts are and seeing what we need. The federally qualified clinics are something that are working very well in Nevada, and quite frankly, I think taxpayers are getting good value for the federal dollar. But there are other things where it's like, listen, in fairness, on the one end, people say repeal and replace. You're not going to do that. But on the other end, there are things that, quite frankly, need to be tuned up from the Affordable Care Act. Most recent example in the House, which is a bipartisan thing, was getting rid of the Cadillac tax on private insurance plans. And so it's not because somebody did something wrong or evil. It was like, this is a natural progression in seeing how things are working and moving on with that. And I guess the bottom line I would say is, you know, I mean, from time to time people go, you know, what's your obsession with healthcare? And it's like, well, it affects everybody from before they're born to dead, at least. And so, I mean, not even taxes do that much. And so it's one of the things that, quite frankly, I think a lot of people across the country are disappointed in because they're still struggling with it. The one bright spot in the whole thing is the Las Vegas Chamber of Commerce started a program that, quite frankly, allows folks that are small business people to get into a, you know, kind of combine and get their own sort of plans as part of a larger group. And it's been a success story. We got some good news from the Department of Labor today. So, and as a matter of fact, it was the Department of Labor that was touting the job that they had done as the first organization in the country that had taken advantage of this. So I think it's one of those things where no matter who you run into, whether it's, you know, in at a rural health clinic or in downtown Las Vegas, where quite frankly it's like everybody's got something going on with healthcare, and it's kind of one of those things that needs attention.
And it needs attention, and it's in the media a lot, Congressman Horsford. And what do you think Congress is doing right now related to healthcare?
I think we have a real opportunity to get something done on prescription affordability. This is the #1 issue that we hear about from our constituents. It doesn't matter what party you belong to, it doesn't matter what region of the state or country you belong in, or what income class you're in. Everyone is paying the price for high-cost prescription medications, some of which are life-saving medications that people literally need to stay alive. And so we've introduced a bill, H.R. 3, that I'm proud that it's moving through the process now. The Ways and Means Committee will have a hearing on it tomorrow, and the other 2 committees are marking up legislation. But essentially what it's going to do, very briefly, is it will allow Medicare to be able to directly negotiate with the drug companies for lower prices. Can you imagine that? We have a federal law that prohibits Medicare from being able to directly negotiate for lower prices. That will not just benefit Medicare beneficiaries, it will benefit everyone in private insurance plans, in the Affordable Care Act, in Medicaid, because they can't charge higher than Medicare. We're going to cap out-of-pocket costs for Medicare beneficiaries. I have a bill that will limit it at $2,000. Right now, seniors pay upwards of $5,100 out of pocket for their medication under Medicare Part D. So this is a real opportunity. It's something I believe we can get done in a bipartisan way. I know our leadership is working with the administration, and there are members in the Senate who are moving bills. And so no matter the chaos and the confusion that's happening in Washington, people sent us here to do a job. And one of the biggest issues that we could address this Congress is lowering the cost of prescription drugs.
And Congresswoman Titus, bipartisan, is this a bipartisan issue? Is this something that we can see moving all the way through?
Well, I'm optimistic. I think it is. You've even heard the president talking about the need to lower drug costs. As it works through the process, I think you will find that it will, people from across the aisle will be supportive of it. Because as Mark was saying, everybody is affected by this, you know, whether it's north or south, urban or rural. So I think there's potential there. Stephen is certainly working very hard to be sure that is the case.
I was just this morning in the Problem Solvers Caucus with the HHS Secretary Azar talking about prescription drugs. There's a package in the Senate, there's H.R. 3 in the House, making sure that we're able to move something forward. So certainly it's something that is getting bipartisan attention, and it is an issue that affects every American, and so important that we get something done on that.
Is there something we can learn from this experience then? I mean, we don't, when we hear bipartisan, we hear more partisan than bipartisan. I mean, is there something that we are doing right that maybe we can replicate in some of the things that are a little more contentious right now in Congress, Congressman Horsford?
You know, honestly, we work every day in a bipartisan way. That doesn't get any attention because it's not newsworthy that we're doing our jobs. I know Mark and my staff just talked about an issue on a public lands issue. no one's going to cover that. What they want to cover is when there's a divisive argument on the floor between the parties. And the lion's share of the work that we are doing here is about addressing healthcare cost, addressing trade, particularly with Mexico and Canada, trying to address income inequality and create better paying jobs for American workers with good livable wages that provide for their families. These are issues that we do work on every single day. And I'm proud that our delegation reflects that willingness to work together. We are always fighting to protect Nevada first. I mean, Mark was one of the deciding votes on the Appropriations Committee that killed the Yucca Mountain measure, or the measure to relicense and refund Yucca Mountain. That passed by, well, we killed it by one vote. Mark Amodei was right there to protect Nevada. But we worked as a delegation to make that happen, and we'll continue to do so when it comes to issues that are important to our state.
Yeah. Congressman Amodei, I mean, how much of that is just getting in the same room and talking here? One of the things that we had a Young Assembly show on Nevada Week, and we had 4 freshmen assembly together. And one of the things they set up in Carson City is the atmosphere is so good as far as them being able to communicate, being able to work with each other. They live in the same areas, and so because of that, they live, work, eat, and breathe politics at that time, and so there's a lot less partisanship there. Is that something you see here on the Hill?
Well, I guess with respect to this group, I think there's an underlying respect. You know, it's like, listen, I respect these people because, quite frankly, they've earned it. And so when you talk about issues, instead of approaching it as a, well, I wonder what Dina from Las Vegas is going to think about this. It's like, hey, here's what we're working on. Here's what I understand the facts to be. Susie, Steve, and whatever. And so that's the approach within this. Now, when you get into the wider, you know, the daily news, evening news sorts of things, it's like, Katie, bar the door. I mean, that's just my opinion. I don't speak for anybody else. But we waste so much time on being political Olympians that you lose. It's like, guess what? A lot of these problems are not that complex. And so it's like, well, if you want to focus on the facts, you know, I mean, let's talk about connectivity. Okay, how do we do that? That's T&I, that's Dina. You know, Stephen's on natural resources. You know, you got education issues too. And you're like, well, we can figure this out without somebody having to take a political, you know, bloodbath for doing it. But quite frankly, there's not a lot of that going on at the higher levels in leadership. And I'm not picking on the speaker or the majority leader or the folks on the other side, but boy, it sure doesn't take much to go, well, the more political it gets, the less chance you have of getting it done. And that's frustrating when you're kind of down to earth folks that just want to be able to come back and say, here's why I think it was a good idea that you elected me and why I'd like to try to do the job for 2 more years. And so if it gets to the point where they're judging you on what a wonderful political athlete you are with talking points and not what you accomplish, it's like, well, then I guess it's probably time to, you know, not really want to see much get done at all.
Congresswoman Lee, let's talk about maybe another very complex issue here, education reform. That is also something else that is cradle to career, right, and goes through many different levels. The committees you're working on and some of the subcommittees too, what are some of the things that you are tackling right now?
You know, we just dropped the higher ed reauthorization, Make a College Affordability Act yesterday, and that's when you talk about what we look at as issues affecting people in our community. Number one issue that I hear about a lot, not number one, healthcare is number one, but a big issue is student debt, school affordability. Also, when we look at healthcare in our state, we have a doctor shortage, we have a healthcare sector shortage, and so making sure we're getting funding into our state to support workforce development along those lines as well. So yeah, I was happy that in the Higher Ed Act that I was able to get 3 pieces of my legislation in it. One, making sure that students who have defaulted on loans can actually get access to their transcripts. You know, if you want people to pay loans, they have to show that they have a job, they have the education. It's sort of a backwards type of regulation that we have. Also cracking down on predatory for-profit colleges, making sure we're putting the guardrails in place to protect students, and also making sure that, you know, that basically if someone is defrauded by a for-profit school, that they get taken care of, because, you know, they're left sitting there holding onto a serious amount of debt with no degree and nowhere to go. And so incredibly important as well.
Your background is not a traditional background. You come from the nonprofit sector, executive leadership of the nonprofit sector. How has that helped you when you are in the committee or the subcommittee?
Well, first of all, I think that from a process point of view, because of that, I have an incredible staff, and you know, you talked about how much we connect with our staff, and they've been phenomenal, making sure that I'm staying up to date with the process and understanding, because you're drinking, like they say, you're drinking from a fire hose when you get here. But listen, I mean, I bring to the table sort of a sensitivity of what the unintended consequences of actions that Congress take might be. And for instance, today I was just in Ed and Labor. We were looking at the new rule changes that the USDA wants to put into SNAP eligibility and what that impact's going to have on students' eligibility for free and reduced lunches in our schools, and for many families that will fall through the cracks. And so, you know, having that sensitivity, having worked with students, some of our most at-risk students, knowing what it means when a family's not automatically qualified for free and reduced lunch, how that will possibly impact a student, what food insecurity means to their ability to do well in school. You know, if you're hungry, you can't learn. And so bringing that on the ground sensitivity helps me have a different lens when we're talking about these issues in the committee.
And from the nonprofit perspective, how can you impart onto your representatives, your fellow delegates as well, kind of that perspective?
Listen, I mean, I think that all of us have experience. I mean, Stephen, Dina, I mean, all of us have been on the ground and have experience with what families are going through. I think that's been probably the best thing that we all do, is get back to our community as much as possible and get out to our communities. And so, you know, I bring a nonprofit background to the table, and it's really understanding how our federal regulations may impact the actual organizations that implement the programs. But I think all of these members here have a great sensitivity around all of that as well.
You mentioned staff, and we did touch upon this, but I want to maybe get a little more detail and feel and context for what this is, Congresswoman Titus. For one thing, how many staff do you have?
I'd have to stop and count, but it's about 16, 18 people, and that's divided between here and Las Vegas. We have staff that deals with specific policy areas, staff that do constituent work, communications experts, the kind of management side of things. All of them I have to trust. You know, you can forgive a mistake, but you can't forgive somebody who's not loyal to you. And so I trust them to give me good information, to give me good advice, and most of all, to help my constituents, and that's what they do. It's some of the staff here have kind of the town and gown problem, where the people in the district think the folks in Washington don't do the real work, and the folks in Washington think the people in the district are just a bunch of yokels. That's not true in my office. We don't even call us staff, we call it a team. And we realize that the legislation we do here affects the constituent work, and what they learn on the ground in the district informs the kind of legislation we want to work on. And it is a real effective unit.
Yeah, and Congressman Amodei, what kind of communication are your staff having then with staff at the state level, county level, city level?
Well, I mean, it's always a growing thing, because there are frustrations with, sometimes it's like, well, didn't somebody call so-and-so who does this or something like that? But that's one of those things where most of my staff's been with me for quite a while. And so we've got 5 in Nevada, 1's in Elko, 4 in Reno, and then the other 8 are here. And I'm kind of a hands-on guy, which will bring some eye rolls with some of my staffers, like, but it's one of those things where it's like, hey, from time to time we'll make mistakes, but quite frankly, we want to basically be able to look the people we serve in the eye and say, we're giving you good value for your tax money that's being spent. And so Dina hit on it, where it's like, listen, the biggest compliment I can give you as a staff member is I trust you to do stuff in my name. Because no matter what you do, there's going to be people thinking your name's a bad name. But when you can say to your staff folks, so-and-so can handle that, that's fine. Let me know how that turns out or whatever, then that's a pretty big compliment. And so I think in my interactions with the staff in the other offices as well as mine, it's like I think we're pretty lucky in terms of those people are all pros.
Let's switch gears and talk about public lands a little bit. Congressman Horsford, both in Southern Nevada and also Congressman Amodei in Northern Nevada, we've got a housing pinch. We keep hearing about a shrinking middle class, but low and moderate income, there's just not enough housing available. There have been, both in Washoe County and Clark County, there have been proposals to potentially take and allocate some of the public lands for affordable housing. First off, Congressman Horsford, are these viable options?
Absolutely. What better use for public lands as we're making them available, and as they get disposed of from the BLM in that process. We have one of the best process in the country as far as SNPLMA legislation that's in place that allows us to use our public lands, and affordable housing is absolutely the top priority that I think we should be putting to use. Now, every community, though, is different. What I need in the Northwest and North Las Vegas isn't exactly the same as some rural parts of my district, or what Mark needs up in Reno and in the northern parts of his district, or in urban areas in Dina and Susie's district. So we need approaches that ultimately local government can implement. Our job at the federal level is to make sure that we get the policy right and to make the land available, whether it's for housing, whether it's for economic development. Obviously, we're doing a lot around solar, we're doing a lot around geothermal, a little bit around wind. But we have to have a partnership. This is not just us alone doing this. It's working with our local government leaders, the tribal leaders, obviously the military, Nellis Air Force Base in our case, naval up in Northern Nevada. So all of us have to work together to make the best possible policy.
And Congressman Amodei, let's talk about the military land as well, that there's 2 expansions that are also on the table. I'm wondering, in Congress, what kind of review is being done, both from an environmental standpoint, and some of these lands are environmentally sensitive and are potentially threatening some wildlife, but there's also economic benefits, of course. How is review happening at the congressional level?
Well, it's happening preliminarily now, but basically the starting point, whether you're talking the Air Force or the Navy, is to say, what's your record of decision? What is it that you're saying here? I want HASC and Natural Resources to approve this bill for Nellis, and I want those 2 committees to approve the same thing for Fallon. And so there's been a lot of talk, and everybody's been working it in their respective regions. But I think where you really start in a formal legislative sense is supposedly in January, they're going to have 2 records of decision. And so they have to get those bills, those proposals out of the Pentagon first. But once they come to the Pentagon doesn't enact those bills. That's us. And so that's where, if you want an affordable housing piece, you want something that's connected with education, you want something that there's an infrastructure deal, whatever it is. And affordable housing, by the way, is one of them, where it's like, I think we've gone out and said to the communities, tell me what your plan is. We can probably help you fund some of that with federal lands to say, here you go. You decide whether you want to build on it, sell it, put it into your program. Local folks, you do that. But the process starts, I think, and by the way, they want to pass both those bills, I think, next year. So it's one of those things where I think everybody's been working on it for probably the last year to one extent or another, but it's the speed's starting to ramp up on that, so that the bills, when they come through those committees, then it's quite frankly, it's like, okay, this is what the governor thinks is good, this is what the tribes think's good, this is the counties, this is everybody affected, the ag folks. And so that's, that's a big lift, but quite frankly, I think Nevada's in an enviable position because of the Southern Nevada Public Lands Management Act, which has been a phenomenal success. As a matter of fact, probably one of our biggest challenges is to keep all of our colleagues from going, we want that money to go into the black hole of the U.S. Treasury. And it's like, quite frankly, we've done responsible things. It authorized 70,000 acres 21 years ago, and in Las Vegas we've sold about 35,000. That is not irresponsible growth policy, in my humble opinion. So anyhow, I think there's a lot of upside and it's a big opportunity for all of us.
I mean, is there a chance of taking that act and replicating it on a much broader scale, and it being the Nevada Lands Management Act, and inclusive to maybe some of the military expansions as well?
Well, I think the approach right now is to take a southern and a northern approach, which makes some sense. Certainly the folks in Clark County are going to want to update SNPLMA and do some other things. It's been 21 years since they've had a bite at the apple, so you can't accuse them of being impatient. And in the north, it's a little more complex because you've got more counties playing and stuff like that. But heck, you've got the Desert National Wildlife Refuge, which is on everybody's mind in the southern thing, and there's plenty of resource issues up north and tribes and all that other. So there's much work to be done, but it's doable. But the thing that most people have a hard time wrapping their heads around is, well, the Navy or the Air Force says this or that, and it's like, well, that's great, no disrespect, but it's the Congress that will pass the legislation, and that's the opportunity to put those 6 thumbprints, if you will, from the Nevada delegation on it.
Well, thank you so much for watching this special 2-part edition of Nevada Week, where we had a great discussion with Nevada's congressional delegates. Well, if you'd like to watch this episode again or access any of the resources that we've discussed on the show, visit our website at vegaspbs.org/Nevada-Week, or visit us on social media at Nevada Week.